Hey everybody, welcome to the InPsight Show with Danielle Egnew, and you are a fly on the wall to everywhere. How the heck are ya? Oh my goodness, you guys, we are starting this podcast today. I'm so excited. It is my birthday today. Today is February 28th. I turned 55 years old, and I am going to celebrate that today. You know, I love my birthday, you guys, and I've got so many blessed things coming up. I've got amazing things coming up. We have a Pope Jane reunion coming up on March 2nd. So for any of you Pope Jane fans, if you're going to be in Montana on March 2nd, which is a Saturday, come out and see Pope Jane with me and Kristen and Holly. Kristen's flying in from Vancouver, drummer Kristen, just for this special event. So come celebrate my birthday and come celebrate this awesome opportunity to hang out. I could not be more excited, you guys. I got family flying in for this. It's really a blessing. And before I ever did any of this psychic work officially, as it were, I was doing obviously a lot of music. That was my job, was rock star. It literally was my job. So it's really fun to turn 55 and to think about this incredible blessed show. We've been working our keisters off for it. I even remastered our first cassette, you guys. It's true. I remastered our very first cassette for this event. And our very first cassette with Pope Jane, we did ourselves. Like we recorded it in a basement and we had to go like 16 tracks into a soundboard and make sure those came out to 2 master tracks. And those 2 tracks went on to 2 tracks of a 4 track. And then we had to put the vocals and the lead guitar on the other 2 tracks. I mean, it was a thing. It was a thing. And of course, I found one consumer cassette. You guys, one Pope Jane consumer cassette that I have, and I went ahead and just mastered it. It took a long time, and it was great, but, it still sounds like a cassette. It's got cassette hiss on it and all this stuff, but I mastered it, you guys, down to a USB drive, because I was going to get CDs, but nobody even does CDs anymore, right? I mean, who even has a CD player? I mean, I don't even have a CD player. It's really sad. I have a mobile one that I can hook up to play, DVDs and CDs into my computer if I need it. But my car, you guys, it's all, it's all Bluetooth and sticks and drives and whatever. So we have this Pope Jane cassette that I mastered down to a USB drive. It's super cool. And it's kind of credit card sized. And it looks like the cassette label on it. It is so awesome. So it looks like a cassette, although it's just a USB drive, which is so much fun. But we've got that. We've got these T-shirts you can go online and buy. And I mean, it's really fun, you guys. And so I'm just celebrating being alive for the amount of time I've been alive. I'm really happy I haven't done something stupid in my youth, in my rock star days, and, drank too much liquor and did something stupid and ended up in my own vomit somewhere. But I never struggled with addiction, yet boy, would you party back in the day. Boy, would you party. You would just party your butt off. So today, February 28th, I'm so excited to have everybody here this morning before my day gets cracking with birthday festivities. I've got my sister-in-law, Melissa, who you guys know, and Holly, who is the bass player for Pope Jane. They're coming over a little later today, and we're going to go noodle around and do fun birthday things. So today, guys, as you join me on this awesome day, and I love my birthday. It's not awesome because I was born. It's just, dang, I mean, we should celebrate ourselves, right? So I hope if your birthday is coming up, for any of my fellow Piscean people, I sure do hope that you are having an absolute blast, whatever you're doing in your Piscean birthday. And so today's podcast is kind of along the lines of what we do with our life and ourself. What do we do? How do we go about our lives? And what do we do with our lives? And how do we live in joy and purposefulness? We're just hanging on by a thread to February here, and tomorrow's the 29th. It's going to be a rare leap year in February where we have an opportunity to kind of expand and have an extra day to get all our crap done. But I mean, if you think about it, the world's changing pretty quickly, and it's kind of hard to keep your eye on the prize in terms of what is the prize anymore. And we've had so many changes, guys, so many changes in the earth. since 2020. I was looking around online, and of course there's there's all these crazy things online now with the election year coming up. And there's people who, of course, are supporters of Trump, who's, probably going to win that nomination from the Republican Party. And people are up there saying, yes, but are you better off than 4 years ago? Gas is more expensive and inflation is higher. And quite honestly, you guys, I would really like everybody to replace the word inflation with corporate greed, because that's really what it is. And I'm tired of this inflation narrative. And I'm really tired of people not understanding, good God, that the president of the United States sort of has some influence on inflated prices. But you guys, we are a capitalist country. We're not a country where the government price sets. I mean, the only way that the government price sets is through the Sherman Antitrust Law, where we make sure that people are not, monopolizing, and so that there can be free market economy. So this is kind of like an actual thing, you guys, where people say, it's the president's fault, we got this economy. Now, whenever you hear inflation, just replace it with the words corporate greed. So here we've got this significant corporate greed, and I'm seeing on Facebook and Twitter and these different Insta, not as much Insta. People kind of stay off of politics on Instagram, which is lovely. But on Twitter and on Facebook, you have these pronunciations from people. Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? But are you better? No, guys, no. 4 years ago, remember, we had bodies in coolers, and we couldn't find toilet paper, and people were going stir crazy because they couldn't leave their house. No, we are not better off than we were 4 years ago. We were getting money from the government because small businesses were shutting and shuttering forever. I mean, not better. That is not better, you guys. But we forget so quickly in America. We have such short attention spans. We look at our gas tanks and we say, but my gas is a little more. And I'm sure the president has everything to do with the gas prices, even though he has nothing to do with OPEC. Okay. So as we go through this time frame and we're trying to figure out, where do we fit in our life right now? Where do we fit in our life? I'm, of course, part of Generation X. And Gen X is notorious for recreating ourselves. And we're doing a lot of recreating of ourselves in our 50s. I have a lot of clients, lots and lots of clients coming up who are saying things like, oh my gosh, I'm 50-some years old. I'm tired of not having any, any kind of sustainable income. My retirement was eaten when my company got sold and downsized, and they cashed us out. And now I'm still working at the same company, but I don't have any retirement anymore. You guys, I hear this stuff all the time. All the time I hear this stuff. So it's kind of intense if you think about it. If you are in a 50-something or late 40-something age group, and we live in a society that just worships youth, I think we're getting better because even our young people are less ageist than we were, considerably less ageist than other older demographics. However, we still have ageism in the marketplace when we're dealing with hiring. And a lot of that hiring practice with ageism has to do with people want young people that don't argue as much. They want young people who they can pay less. They want young people who they can mold into their way of doing things. And what people don't realize, if you're an employer out there and you're hiring, do understand that if you're hiring Gen X, man, we know how to just put our head down and go. We don't do a whole lot of arguing with you. We just kind of look at you with stink eye like, and we get our work done and we go home, because that's just kind of how we roll as a generation. But we are pretty hard workers. So it's interesting to watch everybody recreating themselves. And I had a friend of mine who falls into the millennial category who says, wow, Gen X, you guys, you're starting to talk about yourselves a lot, and it's weird, like with memes and stuff online. And I wrote that song, The Ballad of Gen X, which offended some people, and most people thought it was funny. In all generations thought it was funny. And I told my friend, I said, well, Gen X has notoriously not talked about ourselves because we thought it was ridiculous. And the reason we're kind of sticking up for ourselves now is because we're just lost in the sea of generations. It's really kind of weird. So, it's one of those things where we're all trying to figure out where we fit in. And there's hard workers in all generations, guys. It's just that I can tell you specifically from being part of my generation, we didn't have much choice to not do a lot of work. I mean, if you didn't do a lot of work, there were not a lot of considerations in society. If you weren't making money, there were a lot of parents that just would not let you move back home. If you had anxiety about something, about life, about going out into a really alpha-dominated bully abuse climate back then, back in the 80s when we were leaving high school, there were no societal resting places if you were anxious about that. You basically were told by your parents and your jobs and everybody else to suck it up, buttercup, get up there and get used to it. It's what we all had to get used to. So on one hand, that probably wasn't super for mental health. Yet on the other hand, it was a very interesting lesson in that for the most part, the world as it was back then, and the world is changing, of course, now, and a lot of ways for the better, and a lot of ways I think we could do a lot more work to fix our world. However, back then especially, people kind of just didn't care what your issue was. You had to show up and you had to fulfill your function and go home. And again, yes, that was dysfunctional in the areas of mental health, and there were a lot of issues there. However, it was also an interesting lesson in not making it all about yourself and not making it all about you and what you're going through and your issues. I mean, you call up your girlfriends in the middle of the night and be bawling your head off going, my boss is trying to sexually abuse me. But we didn't have those words back then. We would just be like, my boss is a jerk and he grabbed my butt, And we would band together and we would have our ways of dealing with it. But it wasn't good that it was happening. It was awful. There was a bit of this element of having to push back against the patriarchal and the white patriarchal male at the time, which was really quite something. I mean, if you go back in the 80s, you guys, watch the movie 9 to 5. Okay, just watch 9 to 5. Remember 9 to 5? It was awesome. It had Lily Tomlin and Dolly Parton and Jane Fonda and Dabney Coleman as the misogynist boss. And the thing about 9 to 5 that was so startling is I remember in the 80s going to watch 9 to 5. And I remember thinking, oh, yep, that's that boss. And I was a kid, I was in my teens. But Dabney Coleman's character did not surprise me at all in the 80s. I mean, that's how horrific sexism was back then, you guys. I mean, he was a jerk and we all rooted for the girls to end Dabney Coleman, of course, and his rule and reign as the boss. However, think about that. That was 30, 40 years ago? Dabney Coleman's character was normal, okay? So Gen X came up dealing with all that, and now at least we have safeguards in place so young women aren't getting, well, they shouldn't be, getting as sexually harassed, at least in the workplace. And I think, unfortunately, because of the actions of some really awful guys back in the day, I think sometimes, we have so many safeguards in place, and I'm glad we have them. Please don't get me wrong. We need them because obviously we as a collective society had built a society where if you were male, you could act a different way towards the opposite gender than if you were female. We also co-created a society where we really protected white males in power doing all of that. And, I'll tell you what, if you were a black man doing that, you would have been sent down the river back in the day. But white men had a certain pass and still do to a big regard. So I do think it's good that we have societal awarenesses in place that we didn't have 35, 40 years ago. Sometimes I worry a little bit about the overcorrection, and I'm not talking about the overcorrection in the patriarchy or white males. That's not what I'm talking about. I think it's about time that white men probably play by the rules that the rest of us have been playing for this whole entire time. Fellas, I love you all. You won't die. It's okay. We've all got along just fine with the same rules you are now being asked to play. So you'll live. I guarantee it. I do have concerns, though. In some of our overcorrect, I'm seeing an energetic imbalance that it's just got my alarm bells up Because now, in our correction towards making sure that people are not bullied and not victimized, because obviously we had biased society to where that was like the sport of the week if you were a white guy in power back then. And not all white guys, you guys. Look, I'm kind of tired of also the twitchiness out there where you say one thing and somebody grabs onto it and they're like, oh, she's persecuting all white men. Well, no, I'm not. I'm not an attorney and I am not making blanket statements. I'm a podcast host and I'm a psychic, so hang in there. I'm talking about, you guys, the fact that there were certain white males back then that the whole society gave a different pass to. So my concern now is that we are overcorrecting to the point of making sure that everybody's taken care of, that I've got a lot of I observe a lot of the younger millennials and a lot of our Gen Zs who just are terrified to launch out of their house. They're terrified by what's coming in on the phone. They're terrified because they're all on TikTok and they're all on social media and Twitch and they're all passing around information at breakneck pace about how terrible the world is and all these terrible things that are happening. And there is such an energetic overload for these sweet babies that they're shutting down. And we've got safeguards in place, the same safeguards that are designed to make sure that kids are not victimized. A lot of these kids who are struggling underneath of their own weight, of their anxiety, some of these safeguards are not enabling them to develop healthy and normal muscles to exercise against the pressure of living in the world. And I'm not talking getting out there and, having these kids with mental health issues be ignored, you guys. This is not a zero-sum total game. And I'm really going to be moving in our podcast towards looking at the big picture in all ways. And I have been doing that the entire time in this podcast. Yet I've been noticing as society is polarizing itself a little more in the podcast when I try to bring forward a balance in how we address certain things. People don't want to hear about a balance anymore. They want to hear, well, do all this one thing or do all this other thing. And gang, that's not reality. My work as a psychic and a medium and an angel translator is about observing the big picture. It's about a balance. And we were heavily out of balance, and we still are in the country in terms of racism. We were heavily out of balance in the 80s, where white males had all the power pretty much. And it was just a big free-for-all sexually at the workplace, which was disgusting. I mean, don't even get into the 70s or 60s for women. That was unbelievable what women had to put up with back then. So I'm just saying the balance is in our creation of this world and bringing our purpose to the world. Part of growing up, you guys, is learning to deal with these waves of anxiety and who we are in the world. And our kids are getting hammered with some pretty heavy crap online that my generation, Gen X, didn't have to worry about that. We had the news and we just didn't watch the news or read the newspaper if we wanted to drop out of that. But these kids live on their phones. And they are kids. I had somebody the other day get in my grill about calling them kids. They said, well, kid is really demeaning. They are not kids. They are developing human beings. And I said, yes, that's called a child. So, I mean, you guys, I am the biggest lefty tree hugger you're ever going to find. And when I've got some of my lefty friends coming forward telling me, no, don't call a child, that kid is demeaning. They are a developing human. I'm like, they're a kid, man. Lighten up a little bit. This is the reason the right makes fun of us. Stop saying that stuff. Just stop. They're children still. And children's brains are still developing. So our little babies are getting hammered with all this crazy out there, right? And because they're constantly on their devices, I am observing that they are in this constant trauma mode a lot of times. And of course, being in a constant trauma mode really creates difficulties when the brain is forming. So we've got Gen Z, and my daughter is Gen Z. We've got Gen Z, she's in college, that if they're Gen Zs that are on their phone all the time, a lot of them struggle with not becoming part of the collective anxiety that's out in the world. And it's because it's what's on their devices 24/7. And then, if you'll recall what it was like to be a teenager, okay, remember that? I mean, as teenagers, we're knee-jerky enough. All right, we're going through hormonal changes. We're going through societal changes. We're trying to figure out who we are. Now imagine being that teenager getting hammered with 17 million messages every second about what's hot, what's not, what you're going to do, what you're not going to do, what's happening in the world, what's not happening in the world. Also messages, big changing tides of huge groupthink messages of this is hot, that is not, this is what's terrifying, this is the person we should like, this is the person we shouldn't like. Like it's like a giant collective clique in high school. And the cliques were bad enough in high school because you had all your groups, the cheerleaders, the stoners, you had the weird drama art people, you had everybody. And that was hard enough to navigate just with your own group. Yet now our younger people are sharing a group consciousness with the world, which on one hand is phenomenal because our Gen Zs are coming in with such a profound, open, loving, sweet heart that just wants to save everybody. It's amazing, the spirit they're coming in with. Where I'm seeing that societally we are failing our younger millennials and our Gen Zs is that we are not empowering them to productively field or handle things like normal amounts of anxiety. We're enabling the shutdown mentally in many ways. And that's not going to help these individuals go into a world which is going to continue to be a boiling point over the next 20 years. So we've got these kids who are coming up that are struggling. And I talk to their angels all the time, these kids' angels. And I love this generation. I love Gen Z. I love the millennial generation. I have a sister who's a millennial. I love, and a brother who's a millennial. I love them. And I love their kindness and the sense of balance, and let's not work ourselves into the ground. I mean, that was Gen X's original battle cry. We didn't want to go work for the man either. We're the largest generation of entrepreneurs to date. And also the economy fell apart when we came out of college back then. But, guys, I see that we are creating an issue later by not properly and healthily empowering Gen Z and our younger millennials to process a normal amount of stress, which is normal for this world, which is a lot more than a lot of us grew up with. But there's a lot of collective blame I'm seeing that's being passed around. And that a lot of this is reflections in social media. And it's interesting because I was having a conversation with a Gen Z the other day about this young person just did not want to get a job. And I kind of couldn't blame them because you go to work, you knock your guts off, you get paid $10 an hour in an economy where $10 won't even buy you, it'll buy you two things at the grocery store, And this young person was telling me that they were very upset because they were going to live with their parents. And this person was maybe 17. And they're still in school. So I wasn't sweating them not having a job. I don't sweat anybody's choices. Do what you want. But I literally said to this young person, I said, what are your plans? What do you want to do after high school? And this sweet, brilliant individual said, well, I'm just going to stay home with my parents, and I think I'm going to earn some money playing video games on Twitch, which is actually a thing. You can do that. And I said, okay. I said, so did you set up a Twitch channel? And Twitch is a streamer. If you guys are not familiar with it, it's a live streamer. And it initially was put up there because people watch other people play video games. It's a thing. And a lot of these video game players have sponsorships and whatever, but they get those sponsorships after a ton of work they're doing. They're doing a ton of work to get all that going. And so to get the sponsors in line and whatnot. So I say to this young person, I said, well, that's great. I said, are you going to go get some sponsors? And they just looked at me like, what are you talking about? And I said, well, the people making all that money on Twitch, that is super awesome. And I really hope you're successful. I said, what sponsors are you going to go after? And they said, well, I don't know what you mean. And I said, I explained how sponsorship works and blah. And they said, oh, well, no, I'm just going to get sponsors. And there was a disconnect. And, that's youth too, you guys. Come on. But there was a disconnect in understanding, well, there's X, Y, Z to this outcome. So I got into a conversation with this young person's mom because I was wondering where this great disconnect came from. And I remember you guys being 17 years old and, thinking I was going to go out and be a famous actress and I was just going to walk right into Hollywood and be famous. And I knew there would be some work and some auditions, and I didn't think I would waltz right in to it. I expected there to be difficulty. But of course, I thought that I would be the exception to the rule because that's what we do as young people, right? And the thing I thought was interesting about this young person I was talking to, is they didn't have that same sort of, I could be the exception to the rule. I could be the person who the sponsors just threw money at. They just, honest to God, thought they were going to get all these sponsors. And the reason I'm telling this story is because I have run into this same awareness through this generation. Not all of them. There's a lot of them that are out there working hard and doing their thing. But so many of them are missing like a piece of, there's kind of some middle parts of hustle that goes into bringing the money in. And I was talking to this angel about the younger Gen Zs and the younger millennials, some of them, not all of them. And I'm making sure to say that because I do not want one of you to write me back and say, this is a generation hating podcast, because it's not. So please don't say I'm saying that when I'm not saying that. I'm saying that to not bring this up is going to not be able to bring forward some pieces we need to this puzzle to help these generations coming up in a world that's going to continue to be on fire. And a lot of these kids are disconnected from the part where they get out and exert a ton of effort to change things, and I think a part of this, as I talked to this young person's mom, had to do with, she said that she was really struggling with her child because the child had no concept of not being able to just download things for free on their phone. And they really, because they're a young person, obviously, they really didn't have a concept of, having to pay, like, say, for music or even for the internet, because they knew their parents paid for it. But again, it was just the internet was this thing that was seen like a car or a telephone, like a staple. Right? Not an extra. And it is a staple anymore. This is how I'm going to get the podcast to you guys. I stick it on the internet, right? But there was a piece missing in the functionality of all these things, of all of these. How do I get myself in the world? So I started talking to this generation's angels. And I found out some really interesting stuff about Gen Z and especially the younger millennials, that they are coming into a world where, consumerism and the Mimi great almighty dollarism is failing we're in late stage capitalism already. It's failing the planet already, okay? And we all know that. I'm 55 today, yay. And so we all know that we have these big chunks of consumerism that are failing the planet. This generation is coming in understanding that we need to help everybody in order for all of us to thrive. It's a spiritual awareness that they come in with. And also these kids, when we pass on a generation, you guys, we pass on genome and we pass on chromosomes that are molded by our life experience. So let's just take Gen X, people in my generation. All right. So we might have been having kids at a young age. And some of the Gen Zs right now have Gen X parents. A lot of them have older millennial parents. But in any case, Gen Z is the product of the genetics of either Gen X or millennials. Now, let's just go to Gen X, who would have birthed millennials, unless they had some way older boomer parents, okay, which is a thing too. But boomers and Gen X came up in a world where you had to just freaking struggle your guts off if you were going to make money. And there were not the same sociological safeguards for people experiencing mental health crises or stress. And so there was, in our genetic code, and I'm not saying this is a good thing, I'm just saying it is, the millennials and or the Gen Zs are going to inherit genes that are going to be averse to getting yourself in a situation where you can't put a roof over your head, where you can't pay for things. This is what we do. We chromosomally pass down, you guys, as humans, stuff that wounded us so that the next generation that comes out in evolution will have a instinctual awareness that that's not a good thing. Okay. This is why most of us don't walk up and pet a bear, because deep inside our genome, we had ancestors who were eaten by bears when you did that. So there are those points of our DNA in Gen X, and I'll just use my own generation and the boomers. I'm sure this is true too, but I'm not a boomer. So when we came out of high school, all the jobs were gone. We went into the first big, quote, recession in the early 90s. And I remember battling for a Starbucks job, a part-time barista job, as a 22-year-old person in Seattle, Washington. And I was sitting in the interview room, back when they had interview rooms, with guys in their 40s and 50s and early 60s that had gotten laid off at the Boeing plant. And I just knew, as a young white woman sitting there with a bunch of white men in front of me, I'm like, well, I'm not going to get this job. And I didn't. And I had to keep going back and back and back and back until my interview pool was people my age. And I finally got hired. And so God bless the people, getting jobs going from Boeing as an engineer to Starbucks. I mean, I'm sure that was really super rough. However, I came up at a time. Now, I didn't pass my genetics on, but my wife, Rebecca, she passed these genetics on. Nora's dad, Andy, he passed these genetics on. Everybody came into the world, and he had a big, everybody boarded the struggle bus the minute they got out of college. Unless you were a doctor or a lawyer, or you had a more career-dependent, educationally dependent career, like being a teacher or something like that. So we pass down the genome that says, don't trust the man. Don't trust the man. Don't get into consumerist jobs because they will let you down. And again, like I said, I'm really proud of the fact that Gen X is it is the largest generation of entrepreneurs to date. Kind of because we had to, and we had boomer parents, and our boomer parents were brick and mortar, and they were like, look, man, just get out there and make it happen. I don't care how you pay your bills, but you're not moving home. So figure it out, and we were like, okay. And like I said, yes, I'm very grateful for this world that we have the mental health awareness that we do and all of the things. Yet when I look at the genome that we passed down to Gen Z and now the alphas and their little bitties that are in grade school, this all says, don't trust the system. Don't trust the man. We as Gen Xers initially, some of them went on, some of us went on to be yuppies, which were kind of the generation ahead of us, but some of us went on to be consumerist Michael J. Fox characters, in the 80s. But a lot of us were just working for activism and trying to make the world a better place, and let's all share, and let's get rid of labels, and let's all just be one community. So we also passed that genome down. And so now we've got millennials passing, they have an extra dose of let's all come together and let's not all stand out. So a lot of our Gen Zs are afraid to stand out. And I was talking to the angel who walks with their generation, and I was like, look, how do we help these kids? Because we can't just keep them insulated in a bubble from the world. They have to get out and interface. They've got gifts and talents. They're in this time frame to bring their own version of change. And this angel basically said, well, they're going to bring their version of change by not participating. It's the ultimate quiet quit, And I as a Gen Xer, I thought that was hilarious because that'll bring everything just to a screeching halt, which I also think is hilarious. So I'm just like, oh my God. Okay, so you're telling me that we've passed down our chromosomes that said, avoid the man, avoid crazed greed-based consumerism, avoid wrecking the planet. A lot of Gen X was all the being raised by boomer parents, who a lot of the boomer parents, not all, but a lot of the boomers brought in a very liberal America. Remember, Roe versus Wade, that was the work of the boomers. The Civil Rights Act, that was the work of the boomers, you guys. The boomers were a huge liberating generation. LGBTQ rights got started by the boomers. So I get real upset with our younger generations when they're like, the boomers wrecked the country. I'm like, well, I think greed wrecked the country and we're working on that. But you can thank those baby boomers for bringing change. That's what they brought. And now, we're at where we're at. But that's not one generation, you guys. That's all of us participating in this collective experience that needs to get its groove. So anyway, I'm asking this angel. I'm like, how do we help our Gen Zs and our millennials? The millennials have a little bit more grit in their wiper cloth than a lot of the Gen Zs do. And a lot of that too is that the millennial parents, I've run into a lot of millennial parents who are overworked. They're incredibly tired. And they themselves are overwhelmed. So they're having a hell of a time getting themselves out to work, as we all are anymore, God. And on top of that, you've got these kids who are literally listening on TikTok, or TikTok's mostly where they are, and Twitch, about how, don't go to work. Don't feed the monster. And in one hand, I agree, let's not feed the corporate monster. On the other hand, that puts a lot of financial burden on parents. And a lot of these parents don't even know how to enable the confidence in their kids to go out and move in with roommates. And a lot of these kids that I'm seeing, a lot of the Gen Zs, it's a very popular collective thinking process that living with roommates is poverty living. And that living with roommates is something that a failed society is making us do. And, they just want to get out and have a decent car and a house and all these things, which is very difficult, obviously, for any age right now. But this angel who walks with their generation was saying that not only is this an exercise in collective manifestation with these kids, but it's an exercise of generationally where they're at in comparison to, the rest of us that had to spend a lot of our growing up time enduring being bullied and sexually harassed and assaulted and abused and pushing past that. A lot of our genome went into that grit to get past that. Whereas this particular generation's lesson is to figure out how to bring their individual person to the world and their grit to the world, which is such an interesting thing. It's like they come in polished already. And they are seeking how to apply themselves in the world. And when I try to talk about this with other parents of Gen Zs and younger millennials, I get one of two responses. When I try to say, how do we empower these younger generations to understand that they are miracle machines? They do not need to be afraid of the world. Yes, there's crap that sucks in the world. It sucked when we were younger too. Yes, there's extra things that we didn't have to deal with, like school shootings and other major horrors. There were kidnappings and there was human trafficking back then, but we didn't have a name for it. Now we have a name for it, and we have an awareness around it, which is really awesome. However, when I try to talk to some parents about, guys, how do we empower our kids so that they don't feel like a victim in this world? Because what I'm seeing with a lot of these brilliant and hyper-capable, super spiritually and emotionally developed Gen Zs is they're just surfing this victim consciousness. Many of them, now not all of them obviously, but many of them are just shutting down and blaming. And it's Gen X, it's the boomers, even the millennials are at fault now. Everybody's at fault for giving them a world where they can't make a living, so they're just going to stay home. And eventually, I'm assuming that they will the folks who adhere to that in that younger generation are going to figure out that's not entirely functional in the world. But it is very interesting because there is a group. What I'm noting spiritually is a group. It's a group disablement where they just aren't. There's no. It's like they're just floating in space. There's no, well, gee, I'm going to go do this or I'm going to go do that. It's this stasis, like they're in a cocoon. And what this angel was showing me, and again, this is not all Gen Z, you guys, so please do not hit me with the generation shaming email. I am shaming no one. We need to talk about this because if we don't find a way to societally support our young people and allow them to emotionally feel like they can overcome some hurdles and difficulty and vibrations that are negative, because this world is full of a heck of a lot more people than when I was a teenager. And all of us resonate our issues out there, right? 55, I turned 55 today. So look at that. If I was a guitar, I'd be worth some freaking much money right now. God. But how do we enable these kids' confidence in their ability to navigate what may seem psychologically like an impassable hill? What I found interesting in speaking to some of these Gen Z parents is some of these parents are enabling this victim mentality like you would not believe. And these are really, really educated people. They are smart. They are aware. They are entrepreneurs. They are people who understand what it is to place themselves in the world. And they themselves are creating these little precious bubbles around these kids. And the kids are echoing off of the parents going, oh my gosh, my parents think I can't do this, so I can't do this. Or the parents don't like the way things are going in school, which, okay, I get. Public school can be rough. We have a lot of homeschooling going on, and I'm a huge proponent of however you want to educate your kids. You do you. I'm noticing a lot of the reasons why the kids are being pulled out of school is anxiety. Some of the parents have kids who are on the spectrum or who have special needs, and those needs aren't able to be met by our underfunded public schools. However, again, notwithstanding a huge, big meltdown of a child really suffering, what I'm noticing, parents, is that there's a lot of parents out there that are backing up the narrative that these kids are this fragile and this easily to break. And the kids are crying and they're melting down and they're doing all these things and the parents are freaking out. So they're taking them out of school and then the kids are home and now the kids are home and crying and melting down, even though it's just them and mom. And the parents are like, I don't know what the hell to do with this kid. This kid is non-functional. And these are a lot of times, these are my clients, right? And these angels will show me, well, you were trying to do what you thought was best for your kid, but you pulled the kid out of school. And I'm not talking like severe bullying or anything, guys. I'm just talking about the normal amount of anxiety we have, turning 12 and 13 and 14, growing up, trying to figure out where we are in the world, and the world's chaotic and all these things. And we've got a group of folks here, a big group, a massive group, who are saying, I'm going to stay home and take care of these kids and educate them, which is awesome. Go homeschoolers. It's hard. And that's, if your kids are thriving, that is so outstanding. And I love that. And I admire homeschoolers a ton. What I'm getting a lot of in my clientele are people who took their kids, moved them to private schools. The kids were still having the meltdowns. They took them and they moved them at home. The kids are still having the meltdowns. So it's obviously not school. It's just any expectation at all being put on these kids. And they're just melting down and freaking out and staring at the wall. And I'm not kidding. And they're so medicated, they can't even see straight. And it makes me just heartbroken because this generation, Gen Z, is a magical generation. And it is our job, guys, to show these beautiful, brilliant, capable beings that, yes, the world is a giant flame-throwing shit show right now whose dumpster fire is big enough to lick the clouds, those flames. It's so tall. Yet within each one of us, we have such a tremendous capability if we start developing the skills on transmuting all of this stress into usable action. Gen Z is magical, you guys. Yet I think those who are not Gen Zs, I think generations who kind of got pinched in not having their needs met. I can speak for the boomers and not for the boomers, but I can speak for Gen X. I've talked to a lot of boomers who also didn't have needs met. Gen X didn't have any mental health needs met. We were pretty much just told to suck it up, buttercup, go deal with it. That was not functional. Yet now we're creating such a bubble around this brilliant generation that we are robbing them. This is my observation, spiritually and intellectually and emotionally. We are robbing a lot of this generation from opportunities to understand how to push through and overcome the fears in the head. And instead, we're creating these bubbles for a lot of our Gen Zs and letting them just float in this bubble with this exceptionist rule because they're our baby child or whatever it is, right? I mean, we don't want to see our kids suffer. And we're like, oh my God, no matter what I do, they're just shutting down. They're just shutting down. They're just shutting down. And we don't take their devices away from them because that's how they talk to their friends. And we want to make sure they're at least in communication with somebody. But they're getting all of this hysteria messaging from the same device that's keeping them connected to their kids. And it is hysteria messaging. I went on one time and I started down a rabbit hole of TikTok. And I'd get kind of bored on TikTok because there's a lot of like repeat videos of people trying to come out and say and do something that someone else did. And there's a lot of cool stuff on TikTok too, you guys. You want some really great yard cheats, some yard hacks, man, some how to DIY hacks, go to TikTok. It's awesome. But I digress. A lot of this hysteria was getting passed around. And it's obviously a generational lesson for the Zers, to understand that they have such incredible capabilities in them, but they can't hide from the world. No spiritual teacher ever said, hide from the world. You've got the Hindi teachings, you've got the Buddhist teachings, you've got Christian teachings, you have Muslim teachings. And within all of those is a version of, you got to live in the world, but just don't be of the world. But you got to live in the world. So don't let the turkeys get you down, man. I mean, that's basically the spiritual lesson. And we all, of course, can feel our children. We can feel their struggles. We can feel their freakouts. We can feel it in them. And we want to shelter them from getting shot in school and all of these heinous things that are going on. Again, this is not about homeschooling. Go for it. I think it's amazing. If you have the opportunity and the time to do it, do it. That's awesome. I'm simply saying that in our desire to take care of the emotional and mental health needs of these kids, which is really nothing to do with socialization as much as it has to do with being addicted to a phone that's feeding them psycho stuff 24/7, we are robbing the kids of the socialization that mirrors to them growth. And I don't know about you, but I look back at me as a teenager, and if I would not have been made to do certain things, there's no way in hell I would have done certain stuff. I would have just pulled the exceptionist card every bit I could have as a teenager, because nobody wants to be uncomfortable as a young person or as an adult. And so as I was asking these angels, what do we do with Gen Z? They're so brilliant. They're so sweet. I love Gen Zers. I love them. My daughter's one. I love them. Yet so many of them are being removed from normal sociological interaction and the natural need to connect as a growing teen. They're getting hyper-fixated on their devices, and we are going to end up with a generation that has a giant hole in it where, just going out there and pushing themselves to get work or pushing themselves to do something. We're going to have a giant hole of really, really late bloomers, and there is a spiritual reason for that, because we are kind of pulling the brakes on a really sociopathic consumerist system here in the United States. However, gang, we don't do anybody a service by not, enabling a little bit of strength within someone by reflecting back to them that they're, and I'm not, you guys, all adversity is not the same. There is the type of adversity that you try to live through when you are human trafficked and basically raped 20 times a night and about killed for the first 10 years of your life. That's a particular kind of adversity. There is another kind of adversity when you're just going through puberty and trying to figure out your crap, and it sucks, And so for some reason, probably because the world has gotten so much more violent and insane, we're creating these fishbowls around our young people, societally, which is not helping them grow. It's not helping them figure out, well, how do I bring my gifts and talents out in the world if I don't have this completely protected environment where my every need is met and if I'm rocked one way or the other, I crash. And we are going to have some societal issues that are going to force Gen Z later to kind of come out of some of the shells that some of them are in. And I know a lot of Gen Zers that are out there just major go-getters. So again, this is not a zero-sum total podcast, everybody. However, I know a ton of Gen Zs it's parents to parents, guys. We're making excuses for our kids where we should be really working with them to find ways that they can empower themselves every day so that the world is not this big, overwhelming, horrible thing. Because the world's always been an overwhelming, horrible thing. And until everything's free, I think we're still going to have the anxiety around money. And of course, a lot of these kids got past the boomer and the Gen X and some millennial anxiety over money. And so there's this fear of handling money with some of these kids. I know other kids, you guys are great with their money. I have so many Gen Z little pals that have more in their savings account right now than I do. God bless them. They are killing it. So it's not a one size fits all. It just seems that what I'm seeing spiritually overall is in an attempt to shield our kids from a world that's gone crazy and a country that will not enact common sense gun laws. And, just the regular bullying that's pretty terrible. Now kids are snapping and beating each other's heads on the floor of bathrooms. That wasn't going on when I was in school. There was some kid would threaten you, and maybe there'd be like the tough girls who would have a fight in the park at the end of, school or something. But I mean, to the degree that kids are being wounded and hurt is a description and a mirror to the degree that our youth are seeming to be reaching for some sort of empowerment. And some of these kids are going a really dark place with that and grabbing another child and beating their head to death on a bathroom floor. That's just been happening. And I don't know where these kids are seeing beat kids' heads on the floor. Maybe they're seeing it at home. But the point is that is a form of trying to create a hierarchy where something makes sense, even though it's incredibly dysfunctional to harm another person like that. So I think that, as somebody who's 55, and obviously I'm not dealing with what these kids are dealing with, and I get it. You guys, I get it. You need to trust me on this. I get it. I talk to so many angels, and I look at so many dynamics, and what I'm saying is, we've got to do better, older people. Older people, we have to do better to empower our kids to really connect with their genius, not to just exceptionalize them chronically. And believe me, parents, we get really defensive. We get really defensive when we think somebody's telling us that we are exceptionalizing our child, but we are in many cases. Now, in some cases, we're not. And if you're a parent, you know when you're doing it and you know when you're not doing it. We know as parents when we're exceptionalizing our kids because we're just too damn tired to go that extra step. Or maybe we're already worn down, or maybe we're struggling with the same things they are and we don't have an answer for ourselves, so we don't have it for that kid. Yet, a lot of what I'm seeing is a lot of these kids getting sucked up by church groups. And to one degree, that's great if it's a normal, nice church group. To another degree, this is really terrifying because I see a lot of these Gen Zs just falling in line with whoever's going to give them free stuff and make them feel great and make them feel safe. And, here's your doctrine. Okay. And they make it sound like, oh gosh, we're all part of this beautiful collective where we love everybody. And then these church groups start to turn the narrative. And they say, well, we love everybody except for these people, because these people are the problem. These people are the reason why your parents struggle so much. And I'm again, you guys, this is a big brushstroke, but I am generationally seeing that we've got some younger millennials, some, and we have a greater amount, some of our Gen Zs that are really, really impressionable to whomever's going to give them free stuff and give them some parameters and say, just do this and you're part of the group. Man, that's a recruitment tool for authoritarians, you guys. Do you see where I'm going with all this? I'm not generation hating. I'm trying to figure out how we can get everybody lit up like a Christmas tree so they bring their genius into the world, because we're going to need a lot of help. And so I don't want to freak you out and say, yes, all of our youth is terrible. That's completely stupid. Obviously, that's not true. And there's a lot of youth out there doing incredible things to change the world. Yet, the point of this podcast is creating echo chambers and exceptionalist bubbles, not only around maybe our children, but around ourselves too. You know, when is the echo chamber too much? When is the exceptionalist bubble too much? And I am seeing that we are warping out a generation here, because instead of assisting these young people in figuring out how to really reach inside and find their inner strengths and healthily overcome normal amounts of growth adversity and normal amounts of getting out into the world, we're not doing that because we're so overwhelmed. So we're going to have a big swath of a generation coming up that is missing the tools even in human interaction, because there's this phobia of picking up the phone and calling people. It's so funny. I got to tell you a Nora story. So Nora is our daughter, and Nora is 19. And between the ages of about, 15 to 18, she was in BPA, which is Business Professionals of America. And Nora was always, she just came out the womb a real big go-getter, but she, like any kid, had her lessons to learn. So she hated calling people on the telephone, like was almost in tears, paralytically afraid to call people on the telephone because she grew up texting. Well, part of the BPA experience was, you'd call businesses and ask for sponsorship, and they were trying to teach the kids how to be able to interact with people on a business level. So I remember Nora sitting in her room just crying and saying, I can't do it. I can't call these people. And of course, her mom, Rebecca, sat down and said, Nora, you don't have to be afraid of people. It's just a telephone call. And you're going to have to learn how to get on the phone for yourself. And, she was like 14, 15. And she said to Rebecca, can't you just call for me? And Rebecca said, honey, I'm not going to be around forever. No, I can't call for you. Plus, I'm doing my own stuff. Plus, you need to know how to call somebody on the phone and not die. So here, I'll sit here. Would you want me to sit here with you? And Nora was like, no, God, get out. If I'm going to do this, I don't want you staring at me. That's the last thing I need. But, it wasn't her favorite thing. But we had a couple of those nights where she would just cry and cry. I mean, she was terrified to call somebody on the phone. And we'd sit there and I'd say, why are you so terrified? I don't know. And she would say, finally, it just seems so invasive. You're calling them on their phone and you don't know them, and it's so invasive. So then we got into a great big conversation that this generation thinks that punctuation a lot of times is yelling and screaming. Punctuation is rude. So, I mean, they come in sensitive, you guys, but I mean, in all fairness, and I've got to be honest about this, and I know this is going to just hack off a bunch of people, but it's not always my job, even on my birthday, to be the fan favorite. We are creating bubbles of exceptionalism around these incredible kids, and it is enabling dysfunction in how they interface with their peers in the world. And so we as parents, as uncles, as aunts, as brothers, as sisters, we've got to figure out a way to sit down and have the most incredible conversations with these kids and explain to them why interacting with humans won't kill them. Because a lot of them believe this to be true. And if you have people who are that fearful, gang, then you got generations of people that are easy to manipulate. If you're really, really afraid, then all you need is one person walking by saying, I'm the savior. Come with me. I shall save you from all the things. And the problem with that is that you get the savior coming in. A lot of times people who want to be people's saviors are authoritarian nightmares. And then you have people who haven't developed that kind of, if you want to call it grit or self-esteem or self-confidence, to stand up against the ideology of those who are taking everyone away who doesn't agree with them. And I know that sounds insane, and a lot of these kids are super bright. Yet if you don't have the confidence to say, no, I don't want to be part of that. No, I'm not going to do that. and everybody else around you is crumbling into this thing, and the precedent set is that you crumble into the thing or you retreat. You see where I'm getting at here? So I think this just in summary, guys, at 55 years old, I'm looking at the fact that we have a tremendous opportunity here for all of us to push ourselves out of our bubbles of exceptionalism. And we all have them. And we have an opportunity here to elevate ourselves, to be able to say, wow, okay, maybe I've been retreating from the world and this is what I am modeling for my child. And guys, I am not talking about kids who absolutely need some extra help. Kids who are on the spectrum, and that spectrum takes them to an extent where they cannot interface or don't understand the interfacing. That's a different issue. Back in the world used to call those special needs. Those are needs that need addressed, that are not addressed by mainstream societal whatever. That's different. I'm just talking about normal freak out stuff where we basically disempower our kids so badly by keeping them in a little bubble and acting like they're going to break if they encounter some emotional challenges. And maybe we can't encounter our own emotional challenges, guys. We need to look at this. If we got parents out there who absolutely cannot encounter their own emotional challenges and the world is shutting them down on a regular basis, that is what the child is going to model after. That child's going to be like, oh, my mom or dad shuts down all the time and unplugs and becomes part of another reality and doesn't even deal with the world because they're so busy unplugging. And we will defend as parents. We will defend our unplugging until it's time to get our kid to do something and they won't because they're unplugging. And then what's wrong with them? What's wrong with them is we showed them how to do that. So guys, sometimes, yes, there's healthy unplugging and there's escapist unplugging, and they're two different things. So I would just tell you that if at 55 years old, I'm challenging myself how to get out into the world and how to do some things that I don't necessarily always want to do at 55, man. I just want to retreat. I want to sit on a freaking beach and drink margaritas. That's what I literally want to do. That's what I want to do. I understand why the age for, basically just retirement was 55. There's a spiritual change that happens here. There's an emotional change. There's a F that change. It's a whole thing. But I'm not in a place to retire, so that's not happening. And I made peace with that. I just have the fun where I can have it. Yet it's very important, gang, as we go forward, that we are not creating bubbles of exceptionalism around the brilliance of people who can use some healthy, well-balanced encouragement to go after issues that frighten them and not just shut down and create excuses for shutting down and, oh, well, it's this excuse, it's that excuse, there's a million excuses, I'll do it tomorrow, and pretty soon 3 years goes by. We've all got this to encounter in ourselves as the world continues to change more. And 24 to 26, we've got some exciting changes. We have some weirdo changes. We're going to have some big authoritarians reaching for big power. And the way we waylay all that is teach each other and maybe some older people that have fallen into pockets of fear. Maybe we've got some boomers out there that are in these fear pockets. We need to teach each other that by just simply exercising our voice, our heart in our communities, in giving ourselves a little shove past our own personal discomfort. This is the growth, though. This is the growth zone, everybody. Pushing ourselves past the discomfort is the growth zone. We all have these little bits to do, myself included. I got a lot of areas that I got to reach in and take myself out of the exceptionalist zone sometimes. And as we get older, we can get kind of set in our ways, and we don't want to do this, and we don't want to do that. And some of it we don't need to do, and some of it we probably should stay up on. Because that keeps the brain active. It keeps our purpose in the world. It keeps our spirit active. And let's start coming up with reasons to empower each other, especially our youth. Let's come up with reasons and conversations to have that give each other reasons to step past these areas in our life where we've decided we just can't do it and we're shutting down and this and that. Yes, we need to retreat sometimes. Yes, some of our kids need extra help. I think we all have a good enough head on our shoulders to understand what I'm talking about here. And honest to God, gang, if we become a country where we just have to make 10,000 excuses for ourselves every single time we are not taking on our own spiritual lessons, and we are not taking on our own sociological lessons or our own parenting lessons or our own growth lessons, if all we want to do is blame, well then it's going to make my job easy because there's going to be less and less listeners every single week. So I think that what we ought to do, guys, is just remember we are miracle machines. You are a genius. If you are a parent, it's not our job to be our kids' best buddy. It's at least not when they're growing up. It's our job to show them that they are phenomenal. It's our job to hold a safe space while they flounder and freak out and are wondering what the hell to do. It's our job to say, listen, maybe this child does need some help for depression, or this child does need clinical help for anxiety, or have I actually just created a terrarium for this precious little thing to live all this time, and I maybe created a situation where their muscles can atrophy, and that's on me as a parent. So how do I come back out and show them that they are full of just enough muscle they need to walk that mile? Isn't that fun, you guys? I tell you what, boy, getting older's made me very reflective. All of us need to come on deck. We all need to come on deck. I'm coming on deck at 55. I'm going to get off this podcast here, guys, because I got some beautiful people coming over to just have a wonderful birthday with me today. And I'm going to push myself out of my comfort zone and do a few things today because I don't want to be that being that starts to atrophy. It's not cool. I want to be able to look at my kid and say, hey, if you go ahead and fortify these aspects of yourself, the fear within you will abate and you'll be able to do that thing like make a phone call. And now my kid makes all kinds of phone calls. She's 19. But there was a couple of years there where, my God, you would have thought I was asking her to pour hydrochloric acid in her eyeball. It was just quite something. But she showed herself she can do it. So, let us continue to empower one another. Let us continue to extend compassion and grace and extra effort towards those of us out there that do need the extra effort. Yet let us not disempower those that could use the empowerment. That's not helping, says the angel who walks with the world. So there we go, guys. Thank you for listening. Thank you for making my life amazing, you guys. Honest to God, 55 years old. I'm saying it over and over because now I get these discounts and I'm trying to wrap my brain around the AARP thing. But I'm saying it over and over because I'm still here. And I have all of you in my life, and I love you so much. I do. I love all of you so much. We have so much we're going to do together with this whole world. Let's keep empowering each other. And let's keep giving each other just the tiniest bit of shove past what we don't want to do. Because that's our strength. Thank you. Thank you for giving me little shoves to do things I normally wouldn't do. You guys have changed me in many beautiful ways for the better. You make me courageous. You make me come out and say this kind of stuff on a podcast. When to be perfectly honest with you, there's a big part of me that's sitting over here going, oh my God, dread. I'm going to get the hate mail about how I'm a generation hater and I'm this and I'm that and I don't understand so-and-so's kid and my child is on the spectrum and needs extra help. And I understand all those things, gang. Let us just evaluate where we are creating terrariums of rarification around ourselves and around our kids and around our lives. And make sure we've got that in balance with a healthy maxim of growth and applying our purpose in the world, because that is what's going to bring the change that we want to see. And you applying your brilliance. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here on my birthday. I love you all. Have a beautiful leap year today, tomorrow. And I will see you next podcast.